why some organizations are still dependent on static site generators? Is it because the investment, or is there any other I don't know reason behind it? What do you
Yeah.
think on that regard?
Yeah, like Jesus mentioned, there's a lot of, investment already made into, these tools, into static site generators. And at the end of the day, I mean, there's hard advantages of using it. I mean, if you generate static files, like they're really reliable. You can place them pretty much anywhere. I mean, you can have an S3 bucket and, just expose that as a site and it will work.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, like, I mean, at the end of the day, uh, there are benefits and there's a lot of maturity in these types of tools. At least things like Gatsby, things like Next, they have existed for over 4 or 5 years at this point. So yeah, like I think that's a big advantage, or that's a big concern, especially for big enterprises. We want to use something that we know is reliable, that we know it's going to work, but at the same time, maybe that was not the base use case, or they were not properly implemented, and maybe that's where a lot of concern towards these types of tools come from.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any other reason, Jesus, or basically
Yeah, I
just
think
that?
the no backend dependency on runtime. I mean it's pretty important. The performance, things like that. You can also achieve those right through caching at CDN level, things like that. But again, having having a I will say set of files that you can just put in a bucket or somewhere and just serve your site from it. It was a huge improvement. I mean, there's always a need for a server on build time, and this is where things start getting complicated when a lot of content was there. But again, having those benefits, there was a lot of benefits like security and things like that. And there are also some challenges. We'll talk in a few. But long story short, I think there's a lot of was a lot of like investment in companies, and at some point maybe you have a static site with a lot of content, and you start at some point you realize you still need some dynamic sections on your site, and this is something that we have seen a lot with our I mean customers. So people that probably should have this big static site, and we start like moving here or there, and we totally understand how to help you with doing that. Having like helping you migrating little by little.
Yeah, like from what I understand, it's something that once you have it, it's not as easy like to turn off just like with one click, no? Like you have to have a real good strategy to move forward. And I suppose, like you
Mhm.
were mentioning, there are a lot of challenges involved. And actually, that was the next topic I wanted to dive in. Carlos, in your opinion, what are the biggest challenges this organization face today with static site generators? I think we mentioned something about build time issues, but I don't know if there are any others, or what would you add about this build time aspect?
Yep. So, well, especially like in big, well, organizations, that have big websites, thousands of pages, build time definitely starts to become a concern. Especially, this data is coming from somewhere. Most of the times it's a CMS, maybe a headless CMS. And if you start, building thousands of pages at a time, and even worse, like if you have multiple languages, so you have to build different versions of each page, it starts to add up. And yeah, we've seen, websites that, have maybe a couple of hundred pages, but, in different languages, and they start hitting like 40, 30 minutes of build time. Uh, and there's definitely, strategies to work around that. Something that we have done in the past is split the site into, smaller builds. So for example, if you have a blog post in your site, you have, a customer section in your site, well, maybe there's not really a dependency between the two. Like you could say they're like independent sections of the site, and you can build them separately. And that has the added advantage that if you only want to change, for example, a couple of pages in the blog section, well, you don't have to build the entire site again. Maybe you
Mm.
know just that subset of the site, and that will definitely improve the build time, and and it will also make it more reliable, because if you try to build the entire site and something fails somewhere, at the end of the day, the entire build fails, the entire website fails.
Yeah.
and that adds to the uh, I guess unhappiness whenever you're using the site, and maybe the bad image it gives. They're not, the build failed. We have to start over again. It's going to be next for the next 40 minutes. We have to wait if it finishes or not. So yeah, there's definitely strategies around that specific issue.
And what would you tell me about this like dynamic content needs, or sometimes like when the content needs to be updated rapidly, like what about those challenges, for example?
Yeah. So I guess that's a misconception, and well, it's based on true on facts. That since it's a static site generation, well, a lot of the times where the main benefits will come from, being static file or static sites. But that
Hmm.
doesn't mean that, we cannot have either dynamic content or maybe, like you mentioned, pages that change content dynamically or rapidly. There's always ways of working around that. Even tools, for example, Gatsby, in the recent years, or at least in the most recent updates they had, they expose way, or they have native ways of, serving pages through, server-side rendering, and having some sort of cache layer in between. Again, like we're uh, running into that same cycle when we create a tool that's specialized in something, but then we stray from that happy path, and we have to implement things that come from other tools, or maybe different ways of working around the same issue. But yeah, like to put an example, if you want to capture information from a user, maybe if you want to have some sort of form in the site, and that involves having some logic to get the information, validate them, put it in a database. Just because it's a static site doesn't mean that you cannot do that. You can probably hit something like a serverless function, some sort of lambda function, or any type of backend, uh, and you're able to get the information there, store it, and that does mean that you will have some sort of active backend infrastructure. um, oops, I mean, it can be serverless in the sense that, okay, it's a static function, like you don't have to manage a server per se. Uh,
Mm.
but that doesn't mean that you are unable to do things like that with a static site generator.
Right, right. There's a lot
Yeah,
of misconceptions. Yeah, sorry, Jesus.
yeah, probably your CMS can, have a way to listen to those, post events, when something, you feel something in your a form in your static side, and push that directly to your CMS or CRM systems. And I recall we have done things like that, even push things to Airtable, where people is happy, try,
Mm.
or spreadsheets, people is like happy to just go to those places, and and manage the data. Again, there's the fact that it's static, it doesn't mean you cannot add some dynamic interaction with, for users, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yep.
It makes sense. Yeah, like it's not like you are only limited to using that technology, no? Like you can also combine it with other tools to help you have that dynamic content. Um, and what about like, for example, image processing? In that regard, would it be like the same thing? Like there's some like misconception behind using SSGs, or what do you think on that side?
Yeah, that's something, well, at least something that we've encountered heavily with Gatsby. A lot of these static site generators, they have these tools to improve the performance of the images to the end user. Maybe like they analyze, or they take all the images that are going to be included in the build, and they generate multiple sizes, maybe even different formats for each size. Uh, because at the end of the day, that will improve the user performance. That means that, for example, if a browser supports an image format that is uh, lighter, maybe uh, WebP, for example, not all of browsers support it, but if they're able to support it, they're usually, smaller sizes. So it means that faster loaders, faster loads, and better performance. That's always a good thing. But since that is done usually in every single build, like whenever, at least by default, if you just include these tools and don't change anything, they are going to run a lot of times, in every single build. Sometimes they have some sort of caching, but maybe they're not reliable. And that also adds up, to the build times being, really big, or being, unreliable because of it. At the end of the day, every single little thing counts, and especially, images processing is very processing intensive. A strategy that we have done is, for example, offload that processing to somewhere else. For example, maybe you can have that being done in your CMS. Whenever you upload an image, maybe you pre-process all these images, and have them being served from the CMS. That way, uh, you can still have that same amount of performance improvements to the end user, but you're not, having or setting that responsibility to the build tool. Instead, like your data source, at the end of the day, it is the source of truth for your information. That includes the images, and having them already processed there means that your build tools or your site generator won't have to do that extra work.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree on that. The same way splitting your site, your content site help, like small like microsites or smaller sites, or however you call them. Splitting your type of content in your site help, it's like taking images out of the real-time equation, and as Carlos was mentioning, either going and allowing the CMS to preprocess the image, or just make sure your CMS has an integration with an external service, like Cloudinary or Cloudflare or any other like image processing service that can use, like, where you can push an image,
Mm.
and that image will be like preprocessed and served from CDN, and then basically your CMS will take care of giving you the URL to that external service as content, instead of giving you the image, the URL within the CMS, or the raw image. So again, there's plenty of alternatives you can use here and to reduce the build time. And again, processing image is hard, because image, it's heavy, it's a heavy process, and there's a lot of benefits on splitting, on delegating that to an external service, the same as Carlos mentioned earlier, splitting your site into like multiple sites. Again, there's a lot of, like, I don't say problems, a lot of like situations you need to like take care when dealing with the static site generators, but there's a lot of like options nowadays as well. Talking about like forms, as we were mentioning, I remember like Netlify has their own service that you can just push a form, like HTML form with a certain tag. I don't remember what it was, either like a tag within the form or the form element. And then whenever user submits, they catch that submission and store on their own service. Again, as similar to what we mentioned, like pushing to a like Airtable or whatever. So again, there's plenty of tooling that you can take advantage of to make sure your build times are not that don't take that long, and your user experience navigating the site it's better.